So, Monica, can you see the presentation? Yep, okay, from the beginning. So what is special education? So special education, like I said, it's composed of a lot of laws. So what I want to do is I'm going to show you this little video clip that explains kind of the history and why we have so many laws in special education. And hopefully the closed caption will come up.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Teachings in Education, a short history.
To equalize the educational system for kids who struggle to learn, for kids with disabilities. Way back in the early 1800s, most students with disabilities didn't attend school. In fact, there were laws that really prevented students with disabilities from coming to school. It wasn't until the early 1900s that legislation went into effect that all kids at the school age level had to go to school. So those are called the compulsory attendance laws. And that's really where what's really started special ed moving. And then from there up until today, and you can see from the last slide, in 1965 was really the very first law that really addressed educating kids with disabilities. So from 1965 to now, what is that, a little over 40 years, it's taken us just to get to the point that we're at now. And so, and really, what's really important is this little picture here. These two pictures. So it's really advocacy groups and public pressure that has gotten kids with disabilities to have more of an equitable access to the public education system. And most of the advocacy groups, most of those have been parents. So, you know, I want to say right off the bat that, you know, I'm thankful to parents that parents have stood up for their children and advocated for their children who have disabilities to be educated in the general public education system. So that's kind of a little bit of history. Does anybody have any questions about the history of special education? Okay, so let's say your child has been struggling in school. Maybe they're having some difficulty reading in school, and you don't really know what to do about that. And you think, I wonder if my child has a disability. So there's a whole process to that. There's actually, I think they cite 8 steps, 8 long steps. So I kind of want to go over those steps so that you have an idea of where you need to start and then how it ends. So I'm going to start this one. And I'm sure there's an easier way to do this. All right, play. Oh, no, sorry.
Hello and welcome to Teachings in Education, the special education process. Here we're going to answer the question of how do students get into and out of special education. Now, let's begin with step number 1, screening. Schools must take steps to identify students that may be eligible for special education services. One method of screening is through referrals. States have mandated schools to do a, quote, child find procedure. The next step is the evaluation. Here, the student is assessed in a wide variety of areas related to the suspected disability. These results are used at the eligibility meeting, and the parents have a right for an independent evaluation, and the school must pay for it. Third, eligibility determination. At this stage, school personnel, professionals, and parents analyze the results to determine whether or not a child can receive services. Again, the parents have the right to contest the decision. Now, if a child is eligible, the next step is the IEP meeting. An IEP meeting is scheduled and the parent is invited. At the meeting, they discuss the best possible way to meet the student's needs. After the meeting, the IEP must be written and finalized. The IEP should contain short and long-term goals, strengths and weaknesses, transition planning, present level of academic achievement, and other required components. It's important to know that the IEP is in fact a legal document. The next step is for the school to provide services for the student. The school must follow the written plans in the IEP, as well as ensure the student receive the appropriate accommodations on any type of standardized test. Related services must also be provided. Moving on to number 7, which is to report progress. Progress reports must be sent out as often as non-disabled students. Now, number 8, review of the IEP. The IEP is reviewed at the very least one time a year. The parents are invited to review meetings where the IEP can be amended. The parents also have the right to fight the educational placement of the child. And lastly, reevaluation of the IEP. The child must be reevaluated for special education at least once every 3 years. The results of testing will determine if the child continues to receive special education services. It is at this step that many students exit special education. Right now, I would like to say thank you for your time. Please subscribe to the channel.
Okay, so what does that all mean? That's a lot of information, right? So let's start down here at the bottom. We have a child, a student who needs some help. So what we do is first we kind of do a little screening. And the screening might be something like a quick assessment or an observation, maybe a conference with parents and the school staff to see, what the concern is, and to see, if anybody has any ideas why the child might be struggling. And then where we go from that is sometimes we try some interventions and we say, oh, the child's having trouble doing some reading, really not understanding how to decode words. So let's try this strategy with the student and see if that helps them to decode words better. So at that screening phase then too, we'll try some interventions. So you might hear a lot of the times, we have a student support team and we're going to be talking about interventions. That's what that means, is that we're kind of determining, is the child or is the student responding in a way that shows that after the intervention is delivered, is the student responding positively to that intervention, meaning they're showing progress, they're starting to decode more words, they're starting to be more fluent in their reading of a book. So if that's the case, then we continue on with the intervention because the student is being successful with some additional help. It's when we get to the point that we see that the student isn't responding anymore, they're not being successful, they're not learning anymore, or we might even see a little bit of a backslide, they're going backwards. That's when we might do a referral for special education. And we do the referral for special education because in order to receive special education, the level, and that special education is really about a level of support. And special ed is considered to be a high level of support because for some kids, they're removed from the general education setting in order to receive the special ed services that they need in order to be successful at school. So that becomes what's considered to be restrictive. And that's why special education is at a much higher level than what the interventions are, or extra reading help, or extra, or math help, or tutoring, or after school programming. that's why it takes a referral process, because it's significant and serious enough that we have to do then, after the referral, we do a full evaluation. And so the evaluation is, we have a psychologist who will conduct a battery of tests, and they look at how the student's brain is processing information by the amount of tests, or the kind of tests that they give. They might look at, is the student understanding information that's heard, and at what level? Is the student understanding information that he or she is hearing quickly, or is there a delay in what they're hearing to the point that they understand what's being said? And that would be something called auditory processing. So they're going to test that. They're going to test then also visual processing. So when a student is reading, are they understanding what they read? And then to what time does it take for them to, once they see the word, read it, and then comprehend it or understand it? Is there a delay there? Which might be the reason why the student is struggling to listen, or why they're struggling to learn. So the psychologist will do those kind of tests. Again, kind of looking at how the student's brain is functioning and the areas of how it processes information that needs to be learned. We might have someone from Sochi's team come in, and you'll hear about that next month. And look at, are there any things going on socially and emotionally with a student that we would need to do what we call an educationally related mental health services evaluation. Has the student experienced maybe some trauma? Is the student anxious? Are they uptight? Do they not like coming to school? Do they tell their parents they're sick so they can get out of going to school? You know, what's going on within the student's emotions that the student is having difficulty learning? That might be another assessment. We're going to also do a speech and language assessment. We're going to look to see if the student can articulate words. Can we understand what the student is saying? But we're also going to look at language and how they process language. Again, we're going to look at what they hear. Do they understand what they're hearing? So it's a little different than the processing of information. Processing language, looking at a psychological lens, is really about the speed of understanding. The processing of language is actually, do they understand the language that the person is speaking? So when we have students who speak both Spanish and English, sometimes it takes a little while for them to switch between the two languages, right? So maybe they're hearing and speaking more English in school, and then at home, maybe they're speaking more Spanish at home. So being able to switch between those two languages sometimes presents as a difficulty for younger students. Eventually, the student becomes really proficient in both languages and is able to switch between the two languages really easily. But some kids, we find when we test their language understanding, do they understand English and do they understand Spanish? Or is it a different language? Is it English and, I don't know, German, or English and Vietnamese, or whatever the second language is, if like English is not the first language. For those kids, we're going to look at, again, do they understand, is there one language that's stronger than the other? And for some kids, neither language is strong, which then indicates that maybe they need some speech and language services to help develop a predominant language, because they're just not understanding either language. But that also happens in students who are predominantly monolingual, meaning they only speak one language. So Kids who speak English only, that's the only language they know, sometimes are not understanding and they're not processing how the language is used in order to learn. So we're going to test speech and language. We're also going to, sometimes we look at how the student moves. Is there anything within their fine motor abilities, which would be under the area of occupational therapy. So we're going to look at occupational therapy. Is there something that they can't process information physically? Like if they see something on the board or they see something presented in the front of the room, can they take that information and copy it down on paper? So that process of seeing something and then writing it sometimes is an area where students struggle. So we want to see if there's any type of delay in that area, as well as some sensory issues sometimes in occupational therapy. We look to see if some kids are really impacted by different stimulation in the environment or within themselves, and then they become anxious and then they're not able to learn. So when we do the evaluation, we look at all areas that might impact a student's ability to be successful at school and to learn. So once we do that evaluation, then, and we have 60 days to get an evaluation done after we ask the parent to sign what's called an assessment plan. So the assessment plan is going to tell you, the parent, what kind of tests are we going to be giving your child in order to determine if there's a disability. So we'll go through that with you, let you know, are we going to do an occupational therapy exam or evaluation? Are we going to do the psychoeducational with the psychologist? Are we doing an ERMS with a mental health therapist? And then once we decide with the parent that those are the assessments we're going to use, we put it down on paper, we have you give us permission to be able to evaluate your child. So we evaluate your child, and then we have to determine whether they're eligible or not. And then, so there's 14 different categories where a child can be determined to be eligible to receive special education. And we'll talk about that. That's actually our next slide. But if we determine that the child does have a disability in one of those 14 areas, we write an individual education plan. We also call that lovingly the IEP. So if you hear that a lot, IEPs, that's what it stands for. And really what it means is it's a plan based off of your individual child. It's not based off of a bunch of other kids, your neighbor's kid, the kid down the street, a relative's kid. It's based off of your child and what your child needs and able to, or to be able to learn. And so in that document, there's several different areas that we have to look at and that we write down. And it's really kind of, it's a team decision. So the parent being part of that team would be meeting with a special education teacher, a general education teacher, a psychologist, the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist. Those people all become part of a team, and they discuss the evaluation or the results of the evaluation and how it impacts your child's ability to learn. And then all together, you put together a plan and you say, okay, these are the goals I want my child to be able to obtain within a 1-year period of time. The goals are written, any type of special equipment or special types of instruction that need to be given, those are all identified and written down into the plan. And then the parent gives consent for the district to go ahead and start the plan. And then the district has 1 year to implement that plan before the team comes back together and reviews the plan and looks at, did the child make any progress? How much progress? Did they make enough progress? Do they need to make more progress? The team looks at pretty much everything. And then we'll either update the current IEP or they might have to look at doing some larger changes to the IEP. And then after 3 years, on the third year, we reevaluate the child again to see if they continue to be eligible for special ed. And the reason that we do that is because historically, kids who were determined to be eligible for special ed would receive special education and they would receive an IEP, but then they were never evaluated. And some kids did really well receiving the levels of supports that they were getting in special education, but they never exited out of special education. They were kept in special education. So now that's why we have that law where we have to reevaluate every 3 years to see if the student has made enough progress to be able to exit special education, or whether they have not made enough progress and we need to do some more individual planning with that child. Any questions about the process? It's a really long, complicated process, but that's why you have the school people there to help you, to get you through that. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to say that a child has a disability because they need extra help, but yet they don't really have a disability. Because unfortunately, we live in a society that differences are not 100% celebrated. They're celebrated and we're getting a whole lot better as a society, but we still have things like stereotypes of people. And we don't want to put a stigma on a student who may just have a learning challenge. And that's why we're really careful with determining eligibility for special education, because people still kind of have a perception of students with disabilities. Once you kind of say that, the perception is that those students don't learn, when that's not the case at all. That's not true. Students with disabilities do learn and can learn as much as kids who don't have disabilities. A lot of kids just need the instruction to be given to them in a different way. But there's, again, in looking at the history of special education and how it took 40 years just to get the school system to really look at how to make education equitable or equal, that perception is still there, unfortunately. So that's just something that the school and parents are really concerned about. But definitely kids who have disabilities, we absolutely have to make sure that they can access their education. And then you have school staff that are there to be advocates for your child. And then of course you yourself are an advocate for your child. Any questions about the process? A student would qualify. So this, when we assess a student, this is what we're assessing to find, to see if a student would qualify under one of these categories. So where do you get information? So now that I'm going to stop sharing this. Let me clear out my screen. 1 second. I'm going to exit that. I have to move you guys over. No, I can't do that. Okay. With all that information, some of it that makes sense, some of it that's still a bit confusing. What do you do if you need help or you think your child needs help? So this is the district website. So we have a web page for parents that we have all kinds of information on. And so I want to kind of show you how to get information. And if you need to contact somebody, who do you contact? So you would go onto our website at Palm Springs, PSUSD.us. And then where it says departments, you come down and you find special education and click on it. And here's the basic description of what our role in special education is. And then if you continue to scroll down, you'll see what our mission is. And then here's a bunch of people that work in the special ed department. So again, this is me, I'm the director. We have an assistant director. We have 2 coordinators. Right now, this position we are trying to fill. Sochi Perez, who's here tonight, she's our ERMS coordinator, and ERMS, again, it's the educationally related mental health services. Laura Dyson, she's our supervising nurse. So if your child has some health issues that you think is impacting their ability to learn, or if you have any basic health questions, she's the person that can be contacted. Dr. Kenyon, Sean, he's our behavior specialist. So he works with kids that are having some challenging behaviors in school. Dr. Mance, Jackie Mance, Megan Peterson, and Deb Sather, they are program specialists, and they're the ones that you can always contact to get an immediate response, because out of all of the schools that we have, they are responsible for, I think it's like 6 or 7 schools each. So unlike me, I'm responsible for all the schools. The program specialists are a little more concentrated, so they have fewer schools, fewer people that they work with, so that they can be a resource to the school and a resource to a parent. And then we also have what we call a TOSA, which is a teacher on special assignment. And the TOSAs really work with our teachers and work with them on how to teach differently, how to use or adapt materials so that the student can use the materials to help them learn. And then we have Dean in a new position that we have this year. We've not had this position. He is our assistive technology teacher on special assignment. So his job is to look at technology and work with the technology department in looking at and finding resources that are available for kids to help them learn through the use of technology. And it could be anything from an iPad that has a communication for a student who doesn't have language, who is non-communicative or non-verbal. He would be able to find a speech and language type of application on the iPad that the student could use to communicate in school and then communicate at home. So Mr. Troop, that's what he does. So that's basically a list of the people, aside of the people at the school site that your child goes to or attends. But then over here, we kind of have, again, the overview, which is this page, and then we have the eligibility categories, so you can see them again. Child find, this is the, really, it talks about us having to find, our obligation in the school system is to find kids who would have disabilities so that we make sure that they're getting an equitable education. The IEP, this page talks a little bit about the IEP. This one's loading. So we have some acronyms because in special ed, we have lots of technical terms, but we like to shorten everything to just a couple of letters. So this is our acronyms list. So in case you might not know something, if somebody said, hey, your child, I think they're in the ECE department, and you may not know what ECE is, that you would be able to look up here and find, oh, yeah, it's the early childhood department, I see. Or if they're talking about a service called APE, what the heck is that service? You can always look up APE here, and it's Adaptive Physical Education. So you can find the acronyms. Parent rights, this is a page from the California Department of Education that talks about your parent rights. Because as a parent who has a child that's suspected of having a disability or who has a disability and qualifies for special education, you have rights and your child have rights. And you and your child have more rights than kids and family members who are in the general population, because you're kind of a protected, it's a protective group of kids. Again, because they require specialized instruction, specialized equipment, so that they can access the general education. So here kind of is where your rights are explained to you. We have a tab for programs, and this talks a little bit about the types of programs we have, how we support students in the general education setting, what resource level programming is, special day classes, the adult transition program. So here you can find all of our programs. The next tab, these are the different services. We have a page for state testing that talks about testing, and you can see the other links down here. Here's the parent resources. So this page has resources where the California Department of Ed is, the Community Advisory Committee, the Parent Center, the Riverside County Department of Mental Health. These are all services that you can access. And then these are community resources. And then when your child becomes 16 and older, we start talking about transition services to adulthood. And so these are the areas, and I believe you can just click on it. Yep, you just click on it and it will take you to the website of that agency. So one last area, so these are, again, these are all kind of resources for you. And we do have them in English and Spanish, but I want to take you down here to the bottom area. This is the Special Education Parent Advisory Committee. And it meets once a month. And what it is, it's what it says it is. It's a group of parents that come together and they have a formal meeting. So they have formal officers. They have a president, a vice president, a parliamentarian, and some other offices. And what they do is they talk about ways to help improve the delivery of services and the special education programs in Palm Springs Unified. And so we have 2 program specialists from the administrative special ed department that help facilitate those discussions. And then they bring the information back to me as the director. And then sometimes I attend those meetings as well, but it's really a place where you can go and talk to other parents. And you don't have to have a child with a disability to attend. You may think your child has a disability, and that's a good group of people to kind of network with and talk to see, you know, kind of what how they see special education and maybe how their child qualified and their experience working with the special education department. So that information is there for you too. And I think it has I think the meeting dates are on the calendar. So, and the next one, maybe they're not. I thought they were. Well, I have to make sure that they get on there so that you know dates in case you want to attend those meetings. And I think now they happen at 7 o'clock at night. So it's maybe if you work during the day, it might be easier for you to attend in the evening. So always check out this page so that you can become an involved member of we call it the CPAC, which is, again, Special Education Parent Advisory Committee. So I just glanced over at the time, and I am just going on and on about special education. I could talk forever probably about it. I never think I have enough to say, but apparently I do. So feel free to reach out to me. Again, my email's here on the website. It's just my first initial V, and then my last name, Parkinson, and at PSUSD.us. You can email me anytime, and if I don't respond back to you, I will get somebody to respond back to you. And I just, I know that I don't have really a lot of any time for question and answers, but if you do have questions, please reach out to me, and I will get back to you. I usually try to get back to you within about a 24-hour period of time. Sometimes, depending on how busy the days get, it might be 2 days before I get back, but I will get back to you. Our goal really is to give our kids, all of our kids in the district, an equitable education, so that they can learn and they can be the best that they can be. We take special education very seriously. So we want to make sure that we get your child the services that they need, according to how they learn. So I want to thank the Family Engagement Center for just inviting me. I hope it was informative. I hope I didn't bore you too much. So I was really honored that I came out and was asked. And I'm always available, Ruby. If you need another session, you can always ask me. I'd be happy to meet with the parents and families again.
This was great, Dr. Parkinson. Thank you so much. If you want to use your virtual round of applause or just show her, we're very grateful for you coming out and sharing that information. And then really for allowing the future contact, because I know you're so busy. So that's really nice that that is available to our families to directly email you and get that information. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have a few questions from parents. Should they just refer their questions directly to Vikki, or would you like us to address it here, Ruby?
You know what? I'm fine. I can hang out for a little bit longer, maybe about 5 more minutes. I'd be happy to if there's some immediate questions, I'm happy to answer them for you.